So this is the most, when I did the work in my book, this is the most transformational coach I ever played for. This was my lacrosse coach at Syracuse University, Roy Simmons Jr., winningest coach in the history of the NCAA. He's an artist. He saw the aesthetics and the beauty of the game. Late 1960s, in the midst of all the social chaos, he was Jim Brown's roommate in the midst of Jim Crow in the early 1950s. Greatest running back perhaps in the history of the NFL, and also considered the greatest lacrosse player as well. Taught us all about racism, prejudice, about oppression in this society. Lacrosse is a Native American game. Right outside Syracuse University is the Onondaga Reservation. It's part of the Iroquois Federation. Took us out to the res, taught us about Native American spirituality, Native American injustice. And then whenever we went on a road trip, and if there was a museum by, boy, he would unload that museum to just open our eyes. I know that when I became a coach, that's exactly who I wanted to be like. Second coach in my book, is Transformational Coach, is Moses from the Sacred Writings. You think of the challenge Moses has. He's got to take 2 million people that have just come out of 430 years of slavery. For generation after generation after generation after generation, they lived in a society that says you can't belong. They were denigrated, marginalized, diminished all the way through. 24/7, they got all kinds of misinformation about their own value and worth. Moses' job is to build them into a team that's going to represent God's values to a watching world. I think Moses takes his players through a 3-step process. First thing he does is he has them critique the culture that they've come from. See, they've been in this culture so long, they've ingested these negative messaging, they thought it was about them. They got to understand where this racism came from and what their roots were. Second thing Moses does is he has all of his players articulate and embrace the pain that was caused to them by ingesting these messages. And then the third thing Moses does is he helps every one of his players develop their own coherent narrative. All of us got to make sense out of our own life. And my last coach in the book is Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. Now you think of Oz. Oz would be the epitome of a transactional coach. Hide behind a curtain, no relationships, no mentoring. His whole game plan is to send out his players for one purpose: his validation, his power, his validation. Dorothy would be the exact opposite of that. Dorothy is like every high school coach. Every year you got all these kids that show up and they already have a sense of deficit. I'm just not smart enough. I don't have enough courage. I don't have enough heart. I'm just not pretty enough. I'm not man enough. And Dorothy's going to take her players on a yellow brick road season of self-discovery. She wants them to understand it's not who you are that holds you back. It's what you think you're not. And all of us have been given all kinds of misinformation about our own value, our own worth, our own human potential. And many of us have misinformation about that person sitting next to us as well. So there are 4 fundamental questions that every coach needs to be able to answer, and they really ought to flow out of your own narrative. Every leader answered these as well. And the first question is, why do you coach? Why do you coach? Is it about you or is it about your players? Second question is, why do you coach the way that you do? When you think about how you structure practices, how you talk to your players, the drill you run, why do you do it that way? Is it because you've studied best practices, or are you just merely repeating the way that you were coached? Many of us as players, we were talked down to, we were put in the wrong positions, wrong kind of drills, and yet when we've become coaches, we have this tendency to do the same old tired out drills. Third question is, what does it feel like to be coached by you? You think of the pressure that young people in America are under today. I don't think it's ever been more difficult to be a youngster than it is in America today, with all the conflicting social media, all the messaging, the values that are all a mess. So every one of the student athletes in this room, boy, they got peer pressure, parental pressure, performance pressure. They're at an age and a time, they're trying to figure out their own social emotional makeup, their own identity, their own values in life, and then they walk onto your field. Well, what does that feel like to have you as a coach for young people in America? I think transformational coaches always have an empathic connection to their players. And then the fourth question is, what do you want to accomplish by coaching in terms of changing the lives of your players? I think most coaches that burn out, it's not because of the low pay, the long hours, it's not because of parents. I think most coaches just never coach to something high enough. to justify all the sacrifices, the time they give up in their own life. Boy, I think when you're striving to transform the lives of your players, boy, that's a justification and something to really give your life to. Coaching can be a vocation and a calling. So let me just talk about why do I coach the way that I do. I had to figure out my transformational purpose statement. So I coach to help boys become men of empathy and integrity who will lead, be responsible, and change the world for good. Once I understood what my purpose was, now I could take all of my drills, all of my speeches, and I could start to build a culture, a very intentional culture on my football team in order to fulfill that purpose statement. I think all of us are in this process of helping boys become men, but we've got to have some clear, succinct statement about the difference we're trying to make. Otherwise, we're going to default during the course of the season. Why do I coach the way that I do? I coach because of my own narrative. Boy, I coach because, I didn't have a father. I had this huge father wound. I wanted to make sure when I became a coach, that was fundamental. I wanted to make sure every boy knew what it meant to be a man, what it meant to be a devoted father, a committed husband, foundational. My mother and grandmother raised 4 children in Buffalo, New York. Know the struggle of singles moms. When I built my program, I wanted to make sure that every mom understood that she was part and parcel of the program. All of us were going to work together in helping launch her boy into a man. My own trauma in life, I wanted to make sure I coached in a way that every player could come to me and share their deepest secrets. I'd never shame them. I'd never look down on them. I would validate them and help get them the help that they needed. See, I think all of us need to be coaching out of our own life narratives. It brings certain passions to you. So here's what I want you to think about. Every one of you has 2 fundamental natures. You have this first nature that you inherited. Your basic body type and size, eye color, hair color, skin color, all of that was DNA directed. You had no say over that whatsoever. But every thought you have about how lovable, unlovable, worthy, unworthy, competent, incompetent, every single thought we have about ourselves, all of that information has come from outside of ourselves. We've acquired all of this misinformation about who and what we are. The 2 primary sources of information that have dictated your own self-understanding is 1, all of the messages received from this culture. This culture has its own construct about what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. And when we were little baby boys and little baby girls, this culture wanted to judge every one of us. It wanted to judge us on our race, on our gender, on our physical appearance, the zip code that we came from, the formation of our family. Second source of information that has dictated our own understanding is the way that we were nurtured. The message we received or didn't receive from our own parents, other adults that had power and authority over us. So think of it this way. Every one of you as little baby boys and little baby girls came into the world with this keyboard hanging around your neck. And that keyboard is wired the most powerful computer in the world. And as we went through life, this culture came and typed in all kinds of messages about how it judges, how it perceives us, how it compared us to its own construct. Those messages got typed on our keyboard. They go into our mind. Our mind takes those words and starts to paint a self-portrait. This becomes our self-concept. And the reality in life is this. You move toward and become that which you believe about yourself. But many of us are hanging on to all kinds of old negative messaging, all kinds of misinformation about who and what we are because we've never taken the time to grab hold of our keyboard, and we've got to self-define. We define our own value, our own worth, our own masculinity, our own femininity. Boy, that's the challenge of every man. See, all of us are born with this true nature. I had a grandson born about 5 days ago. And every one of us comes into the world, we have this certain essence. We're open to the world, we're open to love. But as we go through life, we get wounded in life. We get all these scars and we end up creating an ego. Egos are almost always fixated in some point of pain in the past. And the reality in life is the whole journey in life is to learn how to break down your ego in order to live out of your true essence, your true self. It's a spiritual journey. Spirituality has to do with the quest for self-transcendence. How do I move beyond my own self-fixation, my own aggrandizement, my own self-preoccupation? So all of us have been wounded on this journey.
I wish you were never born. I wish you were never born. Get out of my face. You're such a loser. You'll never amount to anything. You stupid idiot.
You're worthless, just like your father.
Just like your father. You're the biggest mistake I ever made.
These are children born with inherent value, worth, and human potential, but they were born in the wrong nurturing community. They got all the wrong messages typed on their keyboard. These are children that are going to go through life, continue to make a decision to validate their lack of love, acceptance, and value apart from some kind of intervention in their lives. But all of us have an opportunity to type on each other's keyboards. So here's what it looks like. You've got this self-concept. This is how you see yourself. Connected to that is your self-esteem. That's how you feel about yourself. Connected to that is your self-talk, how you talk to yourself about yourself, and all that dictates your own self-efficacy in life. So once you understand how all of us have been programmed, and all men and women have been programmed, once you understand how you've been programmed, then you can deprogram that and redefine yourself. So let me talk about cultural messaging for a moment. I'm going to talk about masculinity, then I'm going to talk about femininity. Then I'm going to look at nurturing, and then I'm going to give you my definition of what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman. So I want to suggest this. The 3 scariest words that every man receives in his lifetime is when he's told to be a man. And I'd ask every man in here, you think about the context. 5, 6, 7 years old when someone told you to be a man. It was almost always in the context of stop acting that way. Stop with the tears, stop with the emotion, don't be a mama's boy, some kind of sissy, be a man. And when young boys are taught at a very early age to have emotions, to show them, to share them, to name them, somehow those things are considered signs of masculine power. So what you have taking place in America at a very early age is boys starting to separate their hearts from their head, trying to live life from the neck up. So every man needs to, when you do your own narrative work, who told you to be a man? At what age did you become embarrassed about your own tears, your own emotions? Well, how do you still feel about your own masculinity based on the first mandate in this culture? This is a documentary that has just been released that I had the privilege to be a part of. It's called The Mask You Live In.